Whoa, that was.
All right. Okay, sorry, back up here. Okay, this is cell respiration is essentially pretty much it's a reversal in a way of what we've done. Okay? We have so far, last chapter was photosynthesis. You guys went through the process of how a plant actually makes a glucose molecule.
Calvin cycle.
Calvin cycle, boom. It fixes carbon molecules and makes a carbon molecule of sugar, okay, glucose. This whole process now, okay, kind of like I said a while back. I don't even know what I was on some tangent about something, but we pretty much have a glucose molecule made, all right? Does that plant now, is that plant getting energy from that glucose molecule? No. Something has to happen in order for it to actually get the energy it needs, okay? So, if, when Keaton is working up at Walmart, and that plant, are you still working it?
Yes.
Oh, good. Are you enjoying it or not? Okay, sorry about that.
I hate to eat.
Okay, but aren't you out there just watering and you're all by yourself?
Yeah, it's the only time.
So you enjoy that, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so if that plant out there did not make, if it did not make any, what are you guys doing?
What are you guys doing?
What are you guys doing?
Following him. What are they doing?
Make America great again.
Once that glucose molecule is made, if that plant did not go through cell respiration and did not have mitochondria, it would not be able to actually use that energy or get energy. So that's what this chapter is about. We've made the glucose molecule, and now we're going to actually break it back down. So this is what the objectives are for the chapter. We're going to be able to define aerobic versus anaerobic. Okay, and hopefully that should be pretty easy. You're going to give the generalized reaction for respiration. What are we getting at the end? Compare respiration with photosynthesis because they are similar. They're just kind of backwards. List 3 differences between respiration and photosynthesis. And you're going to also be able to list 5 factors that affect the rate of respiration. Name the 3 biochemical pathways involved in respiration. The first one we're going to be going over today is glycolysis. Then it's the Krebs cycle, and then it's the electron transport chain. Because if you can remember in photosynthesis, the first one was the electron transport chain. Well, this is different now. Discuss the importance of it, describe the steps of aerobic respiration, then explain how respiration influences crop production. All right? Oh, here. So, next here. So what is essentially respiration? It's controlled expenditure of organisms' energy reserved to sustain the whole life process, okay? Photosynthesis made the food, and now it needs some sort of pathway to actually break down the food and use it. Does anybody know what that energy source is at the end that when it breaks that glucose molecule down, the energy source that is actually there for the plant to use? You have gone through this before. Yes, ATP.
2.
Those are the big, there's a lot of them that are made for one glucose molecule. It's more than just 2.
Well,
What?
when we did it, it's
Yeah, ATP. Yes. In photosynthesis, yes. But now in cell respiration, it's going to make a lot of ATP for that plant. And it does occur in the plant at all times. More specifically, it occurs in this next slide, which is everybody got this? You get this?
Yeah.
It occurs in this organelle right here. The reason why you go through and all of this stuff, you learn all this stuff in biology and plant science is because each of those organelles in cells, plant cells, and in your cells don't have chloroplast, unless, again, you're the Jolly Green Giant. No, you don't have chloroplast, I promise. You don't though. But you do have these in your cells. You have the mitochondria. The mitochondria are what actually break down the glucose molecule. And they kind of have some structures inside that also help within this inner membrane, that's where the electron transport chain is going to be, and we'll get to that where the actual glucose is going to be broken down. But it has to go through some processes first to actually make glucose, okay? To break down glucose. In photosynthesis, though, was glucose just automatically made in the electron transport chain? No. What did it have to go through also to make glucose? You said it earlier. Calvin cycle, right? It went through some biological processes. Same for breaking it down. It has to go through some of these biological processes. Okay, first objective for the lesson. I wanted you to define aerobic and anaerobic respiration so we understand what that means. Okay? If something is aerobic process, what does it need? What does it have in it? Well, it has oxygen. Oxygen is present. So when you breathe in, okay, you're not getting total oxygen, which would be cool because, I don't know, has anybody ever had an oxygen mask on?
Yeah.
And that is just pure oxygen, and apparently it just revitalizes your lungs and it's great, right? But when you breathe in, what other atmospheric gases are you breathing in?
Nitrogen.
Nitrogen is a big one. What?
Huge amounts of halogens, carbon dioxide.
Okay, you are breathing in some of that stuff. Some other ones besides oxygen. Nitrogen, probably some CO2, which we're still hoping plants are going to move that out, but there are other gases. But a little small part of it, your cells are able to take out the oxygen that it needs. What happens though, inside of your cells, what do your cells start making? We're not going to get into this too much. But what do your cells start making? Let's say when Hobie's running, right? What do you run?
Hurdles.
Okay, what do you run? The
300.
Oh my gosh, that sucks. Sorry. Excuse my word too, but that is terrible.
Yeah.
When you are on about 200 meters
You want to die?
and you want to die, what about your muscle cells? What do they start doing?
Start cramping up.
They start getting sore and they start cramping up because you don't have enough what in there?
Oxygen.
Oxygen. Okay? So all of a sudden, your cells, especially in your legs, your muscles, wherever it starts getting sore, start producing what?
Lactic acid.
What?
Lactic acid.
Lactic acid. And that lactic acid, as it builds up, is what really starts making your muscles very, very sore. Plants, though, they actually chase, because that whole process is fermentation, okay, is making that lactic acid. It can happen in plants, but plants need oxygen. That's why plants also need oxygen for them to go ahead and go through this process, okay? So there is the next one here. Give the generalized, actually, here's what I want you to do. Really quick, with a partner right by you. So we truly have defined it. I want you to go ahead and discuss just the difference between aerobic and anaerobic respiration. Take 20 seconds, go.
Hey, oxygen.
Yes.
Goes through anaerobic.
You got it. What is it, Cody? Aerobic. Aerobic versus anaerobic. Aerobic has what?
One more. Oxygen.
Oh, oxygen.
Anaerobic doesn't matter. Okay, very good. Here's just the generalized, let's get back up here. Generalized cell, yes.
So what you're saying is if you were to wear an oxygen mask or this hurdles,
I think he would actually do very, now, the problem with that, yeah, when he goes up for that first hurdle, that tank might just hit the hurdle over. But actually, you can just run through those hurdles. They don't discount you, do they?
No, they do. If you run
Oh, how many?
Oh, it's after the
I
first.
saw this one race where this kid just plowed over all these hurdles. It was,
I always
It was
thought that you could
terrible.
just, like, you could not
Can't learn anything about
You can. You just.
Yeah.
it. I have to go over it.
That one person who just.
but the tank, so Cody, it would replenish his oxygen and it
you can wear a little oxygen tank on his
could,
back.
like a spacesuit.
You can't go.
All right, this is the generalized reaction for respiration. Essentially, it's essentially the opposite now of photosynthesis. Because photosynthesis, we had glucose and oxygen that was made over here, and then these things, well, water and carbon dioxide were really the reactants. Okay? Now it's flip-flopped. The biggest thing you need to know, though, right here, from one molecule of glucose, we can get up to 38 adenosine triphosphates. And this energy here is what actually is going to then keep powering the cell. It's going to keep powering that plant cell to keep doing what it's doing, to keep making food for us and essentially make that fruit and everything else that we're going to be eating. All right, another objective was the comparison. Compare photosynthesis and cell respiration. Okay? So, photosynthesis we know produces the food actually, produces the glucose. Respiration breaks it down and uses it for energy. ATP is produced for that photophosphorylation. Anybody remember what that word meant again? What was that photophosphorylation?
Fancy word for putting another phosphate on ADP.
Yes. So we're essentially making ATP here.
Good job.
And then ATP is produced through this oxidative photophosphorylation. So we'll look at that one again. We'll get to that. This occurs in chloroplast. Photosynthesis does. Cell respiration occurs in mitochondria. Oxygen is released in photosynthesis. Respiration does use oxygen for the whole process, and we'll look at that in a little bit. Water is used in photosynthesis. Water is produced in cell respiration. Carbon dioxide is used for photosynthesis. Some carbon dioxide is produced for cell respiration. Photosynthesis occurs in sunlight, and this one occurs, cell respiration occurs in both light and dark. So let's get to our, here's what I want you to do. Real quick, just jot down, if you haven't already, at least list 3 differences between the two. Okay? One difference could essentially be, where is this occurring at?
Occurs in the mitochondria.
Okay, so you could put cell respiration occurs in the mitochondria. So there's one difference, because photosynthesis occurs in the chloroplast. Another difference would be
Water.
yeah, there you go, water. Great. Photosynthesis, we know water, H2O, is broken up, and then what's released? Oxygen. Very good. But in this one, we're actually going to be putting together hydrogen and oxygen molecules to create water. Yes. We'll get to that. V-Money is going to tell us all about it.
That's interesting.
Got one, dude?
We're going to breeze through that one again.
Good.
Then because hopefully it'll make a little bit more sense. And if you guys want to really get them up,
So in photosynthesis,
you can bump a little bit, okay?
respiration.
For about 5 seconds, and then it gets bored.
No. V-Money is not.
Okay.
It sounds like something you would have listened to in high school back when you were.
No, I never listened to that.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Back in my day.
I'm not into the loud subs and all that stuff. I'm not even into the loud exhaust. So
Yeah,
I'm into the factory exhaust. That just is.
I'm into the. I don't really want to get a new one because it costs money and that's worth it.
I'm into that. All right, everybody, get those 3 down.
Yep.
Who needs a new exhaust into the screen?
Okay. Now what I want you to do again with your partner is just discuss the 3 and see if you guys have similar ones or different ones. Okay, go ahead and do that. Go. Take about 15 seconds here.
Produces money.
I didn't know I knew Congress, but
I
the
wish.
prosecutor and federal.
Rich. Could you imagine that?
Another one.
Money just comes out of your body.
Did you get those 3? Hate it. I hate it. I've just hated it. Always have. Probably always will.
In science, is that what you said?
I love science.
I'm sorry.
Everything's put together. Without science, Trenton, you wouldn't be able to put those two big old smokestacks on and figure out how that actually is gonna work inside of your internal combustion engine, right?
What?
Because without science, without physics, that four-step theory doesn't even matter.
What?
You have no idea how that actually converts from that liquid form to the vapor that actually mixes and maybe inside of a carburetor, you know? Or how fuel injection works.
It actually doesn't have.
No, I know that it's not photosynthesis, but essentially, that's what science is though. That internal combustion engine. Nicholas Otto, when he created the internal combustion engine, four-step theory, boom.
Hey, what's the 4 steps?
Hmm?
What's the 4 steps? You're not looking it up.
You have the power stroke, okay? You got intake, you got power, you got compression, you got exhaust. That's it.
Also known as what?
The four cycle theory. I know you're surprised, but I doubt
I'm
it.
not surprised.
All right, next one here, very good. Another objective that I wanted to go over here was the factors affecting respiration, and they are all right here. Of course, for photosynthesis, this is similar. Temperature is a big factor. As it increases, respiration increases. In the wintertime, photosynthesis and cell respiration are really not, they are not working as much.
The plants die for a
But in
time.
the summertime, we're making a lot of oxygen and breaking down a lot of glucose. Also, the more oxygen that's available for some plants during this process, the better it is as well. Soil conditions, and I see that our garden has been tilled up. So we'll be looking at the weather, but we'll probably get some of that stuff planted here pretty soon, speaking of soil. Light, more is better. Growth rate and metabolic activity of tissues. So age and availability of glucose are key. As plants get older, just like with people, they may not be as productive as younger plants, but that's all a circle of life. As Elton John sings in The Lion King.
I knew someone was gonna reference it.
Sorry, I had to. All right, we got a couple slides left here because this is what the 3 biochemical pathways are involved in respiration. The first one is glycolysis. This occurs in the cytoplasm of the cell. Okay. Once that glucose molecule is released outside of the chloroplast, it's just inside of the chloroplast of the cell. This is where we're going to break down that glucose molecule into essentially pyruvic acid. That's the big thing we're going to be making. Pyruvic acid. Then after the pyruvic acid is made, it's going to get into the Krebs cycle. I know the book talks about the carboxylic acid per cycle, but we're gonna refer to it really as the Krebs cycle. It's easier to say. Or TCA pathway, they say. But this occurs in the mitochondrial matrix, releases carbon dioxide and electrons, and then these electrons are going to get back into the electron transport system or electron transport chain, and then essentially make ATP. So we're pretty much reversing this process so we can actually make energy so you can keep living and living well, as George Strait sings. And here's just the process here that we're going to be highlighting. Glycolysis, pyruvic acid comes in here. Krebs cycle happens. We have ATP and NADPH, or ATP and NADH that are made to get into the electron transport chain, and then essentially we're going to be making ATP, but you can see carbon dioxide is made in there as well. Here's some importance of respiration. It's just simply a mechanism that plants use, we use also, because if we ate food and we didn't have mitochondria in our cells, again, we wouldn't be here living, because you'd have no way of ever actually breaking down the food that you eat, the glucose that's in your food, for an actual energy source. This is resemblance a little bit. You can see that the mitochondria does have these internal parts to them, structure inside, but it doesn't quite have the the stroma, the grana, the thylakoids. It doesn't have that. It has this cristae and the matrix, which that's what we're going to be looking at.
Okay.
First one here, glycolysis, and we've already talked about these 3 steps. You got this, Cody? You got these 3? Good. First part here is, now this is kind of a bigger graph, but this is essentially glycolysis right here. Okay. We have a glucose molecule that is here, just floating out there in the cytoplasm of the cell, made from photosynthesis. That glucose molecule, along with some ATP being expelled, is going to then eventually turn into, right here, pyruvate. Pyruvic acid. That is kind of what we're going to be going through here. So let's look at this right here. Glycolysis, simply the process by which glucose is converted into pyruvic acid. That pyruvic acid is then kind of the next step along the chain of reactions. The next step to get to breaking down that ATP. So the overall result of glycolysis is that one 6-carbon glucose molecule is split into 2 3-carbon pyruvic acid molecules. Do any of you remember, comparison again here, in the Calvin cycle, what was that first molecule that was made from that 6-carbon compound after the carbon went into the RUBP? Anybody remember what 3 letters that one was? That 6-carbon molecule was split in half, and then it was that first part, and there was 3 letters that it was summarized as. So it wasn't G3P, it was before G3P, but that was a good call. That was a good call. It is right behind you there.
Yeah, I'm trying to read it, but I don't
Oh.
think they wrote it down. Sorry.
Gee.
Why didn't you take those in?
Oh, I did. I just forgot to take that one down. We got PGA, or the phosphoglycerate. Okay, and then eventually that turned into glyceraldehyde 3-phosphate. Here again, we're breaking down the glucose molecule and making it into pyruvic acid, which will then be able to enter anaerobic or aerobic respiration. If there's oxygen present, it's going to be there. Here's what glycolysis essentially is. The energy of 2 ATP molecules is used to add a phosphate group to glucose, forming a new 6-carbon molecule, which is then split pretty much in half here. 2 3-carbon molecules called phosphoglyceraldehyde, or PGAL molecules, form the 6-carbon molecule for step 1. And again, the biggest thing I want to get out of here is that we get glucose broken into pyruvic acid, which is going to be down here. A phosphate group is then added to each of the PGAL molecules to then essentially, like it says here, the phosphate bond formed in step 3 is broken, which generates 2 more ATP molecules and 2 NADH molecules from these PGAL molecules, which happened up here. They are then converted into pyruvic acid. So essentially, it's kind of like that. It goes through a couple steps, but the biggest thing that happens is this glucose molecule that was made from photosynthesis is broken down, and it's made into a couple different molecules along the way, this PGAL, and then it essentially turns into pyruvic acid. Pyruvic acid is then used to get into the Krebs cycle. Right, so think of glycolysis, meaning that we are breaking down glucose. It's the first part of cell respiration. Okay? Any questions about this? I know it's kind of a confusing thing, but essentially what we just did was make glucose in photosynthesis. Now the way plants do it to get that energy harvested out of there is actually pretty much undo the process. So do you think that is efficient to do it that way? I don't know. That is just the pathway that plants have adapted to over time. So efficiency-wise, is it good for them to actually, I don't know, make that glucose and then break it back down? I don't know, but that's just how they do it. So like I said, essentially I want you to know glucose and glycolysis is glucose molecules made from photosynthesis is broken down into 2 pyruvic acids. And this is what we have for net gain. Glycolysis produces 4 ATP molecules, but only has 1 net gain of 2 because it needs 2 of them to actually power and run. And then pyruvic acid is ultimately the energy source that is needed. Okay, glycolysis, that's what it is. And like I said, some of you have probably, or you did in class, but maybe it'll make a little bit more sense. Hopefully it does. It's only 426, and me and V Money go way back. He does a great job with this. And I think this is bumping and learning right here. Get that hand up. Anybody feel? Let's get rolling with this. Come on, Cody, get it up. Get it up. There it is. Get it up. Bumping and learning. So put your hand up and bump.
Cellular respiration is an aerobic process.
Okay. Now, V Money, he likes to bump a little bit before he really gets into this stuff, all right? And then at the end, when he has just put his knowledge on you, you guys can bump one more time, all right? He always begins and ends with this, and I love it.
It means that it will only happen when oxygen is present.
Yes.
Now, the equation for cellular respiration is
This guy.
Right here. CH60. What is that molecule?
That's right there.
What?
Oxygen.
Glucose.
Yeah! We're taking glucose and oxygen, breaking it down into ATP essentially.
Yeah. Hey, Doug, is that guy a heavy drinker? Because when he's talking about this, he sounds like he's full.
Little tipsy.
Yeah.
Sounds like
I don't know.
glucose and 6 oxygen molecules, which yields, or the products are, 6 carbon dioxide molecules plus 6 water molecules and 38 ATP. Now, ATP stands for adenosine triphosphate. We're going to hear more about that later on, but basically that is energy. The first step in cellular respiration is glycolysis.
That's right.
Glycolysis takes place in the cytoplasm of a cell. And the first step of glycolysis,
There it is.
2 ATP
Glucose.
molecules come together with that 6 carbon glucose molecule,
Sam,
and
look
they
at
drop off one of their phosphate groups, one to each side. So as
Boom. So we have ATP comes in, says, hey, glucose, I love you so much, I'm going to give you 2 phosphates. This then turns the ATP back into ADP. And this is going to go off somewhere else, and we'll pick that up later. But then we got this glucose, 2 phosphates, it immediately breaks into that other molecule called PGAL, phosphoglyceraldehyde.
in this diagram, we now have a phosphate, then the 6 carbon, and then another phosphate group.
Eyes up here. Cody, Kristen, up here. Take your headphones out too, please. Obi, eyes up here.
Obi, this is dope.
This is dope, dog.
We are left with 2 ADP. Now this stands for adenosine diphosphate.
2.
Because now we only have 2 phosphate groups on that adenosine instead of 3, because each one of them gave up one of their phosphate groups to that glucose molecule. Now that glucose molecule will break up into, as you can see to the right, 1. This will be the group to the left. The top one is a group to the left. So split down the middle, and it has a phosphate group to the left, and then a 3 carbon molecule. The bottom one is one to the right, and that has 3 carbons plus a phosphate group to the right. Now, those molecules, for some odd reason that cannot be explained, some weird phenomenon, the phosphate groups want to be to the right, so the top one is actually going to flip, and that brings us to the next slide. The molecule at the top switched, and now it looks exactly like the bottom. Each one of these molecules is going to combine with a NAD+, which is just a carrier molecule, and a phosphate group to form what we see to the right, which is a 3 carbon group with a phosphate to the left and to the right. This reaction also produces NADH, which has 2 electrons, which you can see I diagrammed for you.
Those electrons are going to help carry into the electron, or
the
into
NADH,
Krebs
the two
cycle.
electrons will just go off to the side for now. And these 3 carbon with 2 phosphates will enter this part of the glycolysis. So what we have here,
So we have that phosphoglyceraldehyde, PGAL. Okay, PGAL is made right
carbon
there.
molecule with a phosphate on either side will come together with 2 ADP molecules.
PGAL is right here. Cody, head up.
Give them the phosphate.
Watch this.
Which
You get
will
it.
form 2 ATP. Now, of course, I'm only talking about the top. This is actually happening the top and bottom. So what we get is 4 ATP total and a pyruvic acid. This slide's like the overview of glycolysis. The reactants are glucose, which comes together with 2 ATP, and also another reactant that comes into the equation is 2 NAD plus molecules. Now, the products are 2 pyruvic acid molecules, which are the 3 carbon molecules that I showed you in the last slide, and also 4 ATP molecules and 2 NADH molecules with the 2 electrons. The net ATP of glycolysis is 2. Some might say, yo, B-Money, how'd you get that? I'm like, dog, it's pretty simple. When you enter 2 ATP into the equation and you get 4, you subtract that 2 that you entered in there. So 4 minus 2, yeah, that's right. Yeah, you know that? Yeah, it's 2. That's what I thought. So we get a net of 2 ATP
Get it?
through glycolysis.
Okay.
And that concludes the first step. But hey, stick around because
Yo,
pyruvic
B-Money's
acid
back in
molecules
this.
are going to be driving
Krebs.
around in a Ferrari. That's right, I said it, in a Ferrari.
Are you jealous, Toots?
Yeah, I wish I had a Ferrari.
I wish I was.
You don't want a Ferrari? Oh, V Money's not bumping at the end on this one. Normally V Money bumps. That's all right. So V Money just went through and discussed how we go from glucose, we got energy that's expelled, but then there's also energy that's made, and then these carrier molecules are also made to carry the electrons, but we get pyruvic acid, which is then going to turn into Krebs cycle. Any questions on that?
No.
Because that video will probably also help you then with the worksheet that we will finish up here in just a second.
One. What worksheet? Done.
All right.
Done with the worksheet. Done.
Shh.
I just want to make sure I outline